It is Thursday, February 12, 2026. And I want to start today by asking you to picture something very, very specific. I want you to picture a drawer in a desk. Maybe it's one of those old wooden ones in your study. You know the kind. Maybe it's a bit dusty. Maybe it's full of old receipts, paper clips, rubber bands, all that stuff. And somewhere in that drawer, there's a piece of paper. It's an insurance policy.
Right. It's just a standard, completely mundane piece of paperwork, the kind of thing you might file away and, frankly, forget about for 20 years.
Exactly. And in this case, it's a specific type of policy, an education savings policy.
It's about as ordinary as financial instruments get. I mean, it is the definition of vanilla finance. It's the kind of thing a parent buys when their child is, what, a toddler? Thinking about college tuition 2 decades down the line.
It's a symbol of hope.
It represents safety. It represents the future. It's a promise, really, a promise made by a parent to a child.
It's an act of love. And in this specific case, the policy we are talking about had a cash value of exactly 88,609 Hong Kong dollars.
Which is, what, about 11,300 US dollars?
Roughly, yeah. Now, in the grand scheme of global finance, or heck, even just the Hong Kong property market where a tiny apartment can cost millions, that amount of money is a rounding error. It's a very small sum.
It is. You probably couldn't buy a decent used car for that in many places. But yesterday, February 11th, 2026, that small sum of money, that mundane piece of paper from the back of a drawer, it became the centerpiece of a verdict. A verdict that has absolutely shaken the legal and political landscape of Hong Kong.
We are talking about the conviction of a 69-year-old man named Kwok Yin-sang. And let's be really clear about what he was charged with. It wasn't fraud, it wasn't tax evasion, it wasn't money laundering in the traditional sense you might think of. It was a national security offense.
Specifically, the charge was attempting to deal with the financial assets of an absconder. And this is a historic moment. There's no other way to put it. This is the first conviction of its kind under Article 23, that really rigorous security law they passed back in 2024. And what makes this case so significant, and frankly so chilling to legal observers around the world, is the nature of the act itself. Kwok Yin-sang wasn't funding a revolution. He wasn't buying weapons on the black market. He wasn't organizing some kind of protest.
He was trying to cancel the insurance policy we just mentioned.
That's it. He went to the insurance agent to get his money back.
That is the sum total of the action.
The entire action.
Yeah.
And the absconder in question.
That would be his daughter.
Correct. Anna Kwok, a prominent democracy activist now living in the United States.
So today on the Deep Dive, we are going to unpack this case. We really need to understand how a father trying to cash out an old insurance policy ends up facing serious prison time. But more than that, we need to look at the legal machinery behind this verdict. This isn't just about one family.
Not at all.
It is about the shadow of the law, this thing called Article 23, and how it has fundamentally redrawn the lines between family, finance, and state security.
And we have to talk about what this signals for the future. Because when the law reaches into the relationship between a father and a daughter, when it enters the living room and the bank account in this very specific way, we have crossed a threshold. There's no going back from that. It changes the calculus for everyone living in the city and, honestly, for everyone doing business with it.
Okay, let's start with the man at the center of this, Kwok Yin-sang. I want to walk through the timeline here because this story really starts decades ago. It feels almost like a tragedy written in 2 acts.
It really does. Act 1 starts in 1999. So let's set the scene. Hong Kong had just been handed back to China 2 years prior, right? 1997. The atmosphere back then was so different. There was uncertainty for sure, but there was also this robust sense of business as usual. The city was humming.
A lot of cautious optimism.
Exactly. And in that environment, Kwok Yin-sang buys an education savings policy for his daughter, Anna. She was just a toddler at the time.
A completely normal thing for a father to do. He's thinking, my kid is going to go to university one day. I need to start saving up. Very responsible.
Totally normal. And he pays the premiums on this policy for years, every month or every year. A little bit of money goes into it. It's a long-term investment in her future. It's a very traditional, very responsible thing to do. Now, we have to fast forward. We skip over 20 years of history.
2019 and 2020?
Yes. And that is when the world turned upside down for Hong Kong.
That's putting it mildly.
the political landscape shifted, dramatically. We saw the massive pro-democracy protests in 2019, which were then followed by the imposition of the national security law by Beijing in the summer of 2020. And Anna Kwok, the toddler from 1999, is now a young woman.
And she gets involved in activism.
Deeply involved. She eventually leaves Hong Kong because of the changing climate, because of the risks.
And this is where things get legally complicated for the father who stayed behind.
This is where Act 2 begins. By 2023, Anna is officially wanted by the Hong Kong authorities. She's designated as an absconder. Now, that is a legal term we are going to spend a lot of time on today because it's the key to this whole case.
So fast forward again to April 2025. This is the moment of the alleged crime.
Right. This is the incident. The father, Kwok Yin-sang, attempts to terminate that old insurance policy. He just wants to take the cash value, that $11,300 and liquidate it. Close the account.
So he walks into an insurance office, puts the policy on the desk, and says something like, "I'd like to cancel this and take the check, please."
And that act, that simple request, was the criminal act.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. Why? If he paid for it, why isn't it his money?
This is where the law gets incredibly granular, and you can see how the net is constructed. Technically, under the terms of the policy itself, when Anna turned 18, the control of the policy, or at least the beneficial interest, shifted to her.
Even though he was the one paying the premiums all those years.
Even though he paid for it, even though he was the one holding the paperwork. The authorities argued that the policy was effectively hers. It was her asset. Therefore, by trying to cancel it, he was dealing with her assets.
And since she is an absconder, dealing with her assets is a crime under Article 23.
Precisely. The prosecution's argument was quite strict, quite black and white. They didn't just say he made a mistake or was ignorant of the law. They argued that he knew she was wanted.
They had evidence for that.
Well, according to the reporting on the case, during police questioning, he reportedly admitted that he knew she was a wanted fugitive. He also apparently stated that he tried to cancel the policy specifically because she was no longer in Hong Kong.
Oh. Okay, so from the prosecution's point of view, that's the smoking gun. They're saying you knew she was a fugitive, you knew this money was legally connected to her, and you tried to move it. They're painting it as an intentional act to circumvent the asset freeze.
Exactly. They see it as a deliberate attempt to get around the national security measures.
But the defense had a very different take, obviously.
Of course. They pleaded not guilty. Their core argument was, look, family ties shouldn't automatically trigger these incredibly powerful national security provisions. This is a father-daughter relationship. He was just managing his own financial affairs, trying to sort out this old policy.
Did they argue about where the money was going?
Yes, and this is a crucial detail. They pointed out that there was zero evidence that he was going to send the money to her. None.
He wasn't wiring it to Washington, D.C.? He wasn't trying to fund her activism?
No evidence of that was presented at all.
Yeah.
He just wanted to liquidate the policy. We can speculate, right? Maybe he needed the money for his own retirement. Maybe he just wanted to sever that financial tie to protect himself, thinking an open policy in her name was a liability.
Right, which is ironic, given what happened.
Deeply ironic. But legally, for the court, the intent to fund her wasn't the main issue. The issue was the act of touching the asset itself.
And yesterday, Acting Principal Magistrate Cheng Lim-chi gave the verdict.
Guilty.
Just like that.
Guilty. The magistrate ruled that he must have known about her status as a wanted person, and that his actions, regardless of his ultimate intention for the money, constituted illegal dealing with assets. It's what we might call a strict liability approach in layman's terms. The court is essentially saying, if you touch the money of an absconder, you are in the blast radius. Your intent to simply close an old account doesn't matter. The connection is the crime.
Okay, before we get into the really deep legal weeds of Article 23, and there are a lot of weeds, we need to talk about the daughter. We need to talk about Anna Kwok, because her profile is what makes this a major international headline case. If this was a random person, maybe we wouldn't be seeing this level of scrutiny. Who is she?
You're right. She is central to this. Anna Kwok is 27 years old, and she has become one of the most visible faces of the Hong Kong pro-democracy diaspora. She is the executive director of the Hong Kong Democracy Council, or HKDC, and that organization is based in Washington, D.C.
So she is right there, lobbying directly in the halls of American power. She's meeting with senators, she's testifying in congressional hearings, she's talking to the press.
All of it. She is very, very effective at keeping the Hong Kong issue on the agenda in Western capitals. And that, of course, has made her a primary target for the authorities back home. She's been wanted by Hong Kong authorities since 2023. And there is actually a bounty on her head.
A bounty, you mean like in an old Western movie?
It's essentially that. It's a reward for information leading to her arrest. The amount is 1 million Hong Kong dollars.
Which is about 128,000 US dollars.
Yes. That is a life-changing amount of money for many people, and it's placed on the head of a 27-year-old political activist for what she says and who she meets.
What are the specific accusations against her? What's the official charge sheet?
It's the standard suite of national security charges we've seen used against other activists. The main one is colluding with foreign forces, also advocating for sanctions against Hong Kong and Chinese officials, and engaging in hostile activities.
And in her case, hostile activities largely refers to meeting with foreign politicians.
Pretty much. Meeting with politicians to discuss human rights, testifying about the erosion of freedoms in Hong Kong.
Which in the U.S. is just called lobbying or advocacy. It's a Tuesday in Washington. But under Hong Kong law, that is collusion.
Exactly. The definition of the crime depends entirely on where you were standing. And her reaction to her father's conviction was immediate and honestly quite heartbreaking to read. She posted on X, formerly Twitter, almost immediately after the verdict.
What did she say?
She wrote, quote, "Today, my father was convicted simply for being my father."
Wow. That is a heavy statement. Convicted for being my father.
It is. It frames the entire issue. She went on to describe the verdict as hostage-taking and transnational repression. She's arguing that since the authorities can't reach her in Washington, they can't fly the police to D.C. to arrest her, they are striking at the only thing they can reach. They are striking at her family back home.
There was a detail in the sources about how she experienced the trial itself. I mean, it wasn't like she could just call him up and ask how it went. Right?
No, and that's the personal tragedy of it. She described spending holidays, really important traditional family times like the Mid-Autumn Festival and the Winter Solstice, just waiting for any scrap of news. She noted that the only way she could see her father's condition was through press photos taken by journalists as he entered or left the court.
So she's looking at a picture on her computer screen.
She had to zoom in on a JPEG on a screen to see if her dad looked tired or sick or scared because the legal restrictions, the bail conditions, prevented direct contact. It's a very modern, very bleak picture of separation. It really brings home the immense personal cost of these political battles.
It does. And this brings us to the tool, the weapon that made this conviction possible. We need to distinguish between the two layers of security law in Hong Kong, because I think people often get them confused. They just hear national security law and think it's all one thing.
That's a great point. They are siblings, but they are different. You have the 2020 national security law, and then you have the 2024 Article 23 legislation.
Right. So 2020 was the big headline year. That's when Beijing stepped in directly after the protests.
Yes. The 2020 NSL was imposed directly by Beijing. It completely bypassed the local Hong Kong legislature. It was a direct response to the chaos on the streets, the Molotov cocktails, the airport occupation, the sense that the city was spinning out of control. It criminalized 4 specific things: secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces.
It was the sledgehammer.
That's the perfect word for it. It was designed to stop the bleeding immediately, to restore order from Beijing's perspective.
Okay, so that's layer 1, the sledgehammer from Beijing. But this conviction of the father, Kwok Yin-sang, happened under Layer 2, Article 23. What is the difference?
Article 23 is local legislation. It's formally called the Safeguarding National Security Ordinance. It was enacted much more recently, in March 2024. The stated purpose of this local law was to close the gaps left by the 2020 NSL.
Close the gaps. That implies the 2020 sledgehammer law wasn't strict enough.
Or not comprehensive enough in the eyes of the government, yeah. Article 23 deepens and widens the enforcement mechanisms, and, crucially, it localizes them. It's Hong Kong's own version. Specifically, it introduced these incredibly detailed provisions about absconders and their assets. The 2020 law criminalized the big acts of rebellion. Article 23 criminalizes the support structures, the indirect handling of funds, the failure to report treason, things like that.
So it's less of a sledgehammer and more of a scalpel, or maybe a net.
A very, very fine meshed net. That's a good way to think about it.
And Article 23 has a long, really complicated history in Hong Kong, doesn't it? This wasn't some new idea that just popped up in 2024.
Oh, not at all. Far from it. This has been the third rail of Hong Kong politics for decades. The obligation to pass national security laws was actually written into the Basic Law, Hong Kong's mini-constitution, right from the start, back in 1997. It was a constitutional duty. Article 23 of the Basic Law literally says Hong Kong shall enact laws on its own to prohibit these kinds of acts.
But they didn't pass it for almost 27 years. Why the delay?
They tried. They tried once back in 2003. And if you remember 2003 in Hong Kong, it was a massive political event. The government proposed the law, and 500,000 people marched in the streets. 500,000. It was one of the biggest demonstrations in Hong Kong history at the time. People were terrified that Article 23 would destroy civil liberties, press freedom, and the rule of law that made Hong Kong special.
And it worked. The march actually worked.
It did. It was a stunning success for civil society. The Liberal Party, which was a pro-government, pro-business party, got cold feet and pulled its support at the last minute. The government had to withdraw the bill in humiliation. The security minister eventually resigned. It was a huge victory for the people. And for 2 decades after that, no leader dared to touch it. It was seen as political suicide.
Until 2024.
Until 2024. And the difference in 2024 was just stark. In 2003, it triggered mass protests. In 2024, after the opposition had been largely dismantled or imprisoned under the 2020 NSL, Article 23 passed unanimously.
Unanimously? You mean not a single vote against it?
Not one. The Legislative Council, now filled with people vetted as patriots, passed it in just 11 days. From March 8 to March 19. They fast-tracked the entire process, and the authorities claim they had 98.64% support in the public consultation period beforehand.
That is a very specific and very, very high number. It sounds like the kind of number you get when people are afraid to say no.
It is a number that reflects the new political reality of Hong Kong. The space for public dissent had been effectively silenced before the bill was even introduced. The opposition figures who would have voted against it, who would have organized protests against it, were either in jail or in exile, like Anna Kwok.
Okay, so let's dig into what is actually in this law. Because Kwok Yin-sang got caught in this one specific absconder provision, but there's a lot more in there. The sources mention 7 categories of offenses. I think it's really important we run through these to understand the sheer scope of this thing.
Right. Looking at these categories helps us understand why that shadow of the law metaphor is so apt. It covers so much ground. It's not just about bombs and guns.
Let's run through them. Okay, category 1, treason.
This is the classic one. Levying war against China, assisting enemies in a time of war. The penalty is up to life imprisonment. It also includes inciting mutiny within the armed forces. This is fairly standard stuff in the national security laws of most jurisdictions, honestly.
Right. Okay, number 2, insurrection.
Now, this is interesting because it covers inciting riots that endanger national security. Critics worry that this is where the line between protest and insurrection gets incredibly blurry. If you organize a large demonstration that blocks a major road and some people get violent and throw bottles, does that now count as insurrection? The penalty is up to 10 years. It really raises the stakes for any kind of street mobilization.
Okay, category number 3, sabotage.
This one is very modern, very 21st century. It criminalizes damaging public infrastructure, transport, utilities, but also electronic systems. And here is the real kicker. It applies extraterritorially.
What does that mean in practice? What does extraterritorially mean here?
It means if you are sitting in London or New York or Toronto and you launch a cyber attack that hacks a Hong Kong government website, or you do something that disrupts the financial system in Hong Kong, you can be charged with sabotage under Article 23. They can issue a warrant for your arrest. The penalty is up to 20 years, or even life if it endangers lives.
So the law has global reach.
In theory, yes.
Number 4, external interference.
This targets collusion with external forces. And this is one of the most controversial parts because external forces is defined so broadly. It includes foreign governments, foreign political organizations, international bodies, even some NGOs. It criminalizes using improper means to influence Hong Kong or Chinese government affairs.
And improper means includes what? I imagine it's not just bribery.
No, it includes things like publishing false or misleading statements.
False statements.
Yeah.
That feels like it puts a huge amount of pressure on journalists, academics, researchers.
It absolutely does. Imagine you're an international NGO and you write a critical report on human rights in Hong Kong. The government can turn around and say your data is wrong, that it's a false statement intended to interfere. Suddenly, you aren't just a critic, you are a criminal engaging in external interference. It creates a massive chilling effect on any kind of critical analysis from outside.
Okay, number 5, state secrets and espionage.
This is a huge shift from previous laws. The definition of state secrets was expanded significantly. It's no longer just military plans or secret codes. It now includes secrets regarding economic, technological, and social development.
Well, hold on. Economic and social development. So if I'm a financial analyst and I find out the GDP numbers before they are officially released, or if I dig up some information about a new land development deal.
Theoretically, yes. If the government certifies that information as a state secret, possessing or sharing it could be a crime. It blurs the line between financial journalism, corporate due diligence, and espionage. If you are an investigator trying to find out if a company is solvent and you dig up some data the government wants hidden, are you now a spy? This is what keeps bankers and lawyers up at night.
I can see why. Okay, number 6, sedition.
This updates the old colonial-era sedition laws, making them stricter. It criminalizes inciting hatred or disaffection against the government. And the key here is that you don't need to intend to incite violence. Just inciting hatred is enough.
So if you draw a political cartoon that makes the chief executive look foolish and it makes people angry at the government, that could be sedition.
It could be. It's about the effect on public emotion, not just the call to action.
And finally, number 7, the one that trapped Kwok Yin-sang,
Yeah.
the absconder measures.
This is the mechanism for targeting the diaspora. Once someone is designated an absconder by the authorities, the government gains a whole toolkit of powers against them. They can cancel their passport, suspend their professional qualifications, so if you're a doctor or a lawyer, you can't practice anymore, and, crucially, freeze their assets. And not just freeze them, prohibit anyone, anywhere, from dealing with those assets.
And as we've seen, dealing with can mean a father trying to cancel an old, small insurance policy.
Exactly, direct or indirect. The net is extremely tight. It essentially makes the person financially radioactive. No bank, no insurer, no business partner, no family member can touch their financial affairs without risking years in prison.
You know, it's not just the crimes themselves, is it? The sources talk about the architecture of control. It's how the law is enforced. The procedural stuff can be just as punishing.
That's a vital point. Often the punishment is the process itself. For example, let's look at detention limits. Before all this, the police could hold you for 48 hours without charging you, a pretty standard limit in common law systems. After that, they had to either charge you or let you go.
Now, what is it now?
It's up to 16 days.
16 days, without a charge. That's over 2 weeks sitting in a cell without even knowing officially what you were being accused of in court.
Yes. That is a very, very long time to be held incommunicado. It can break people. And there are also new restrictions on choosing your lawyer. If the authorities deem that the lawyer you've chosen is a security risk, they can bar them from representing you.
So you don't even have the right to the lawyer of your choice.
Not if it's a national security case and the government objects. And parole. If you are convicted of a national security offense, getting out early for good behavior is much, much harder now. The entire system, from arrest to post-conviction, is designed to keep you entangled.
This brings us back to that concept of the shadow. The source mentions this idea of deterrence through intimacy. That is a chilling phrase. What does it actually mean in practice?
It's a very accurate description of the strategy. The shadow metaphor suggests that when an activist flees Hong Kong, they might be physically safe. They are walking in the sun in Central Park or along the Thames, but their shadow stays behind. And that shadow falls directly on their parents, their siblings, their friends who remained in Hong Kong.
It effectively weaponizes their most personal relationship.
Oh, precisely. The logic is brutal, but from a state control perspective, very effective. If the government cannot arrest Anna Kwok in Washington because of U.S. jurisdiction, they can squeeze the people she loves in Hong Kong. It's a way of raising the cost of dissent exponentially. If you speak out, you aren't just risking your own freedom, you're risking the freedom and financial stability of your 69-year-old father who has nothing to do with politics.
And this isn't an entirely new tactic in the Chinese context, right? We've heard stories like this coming from the mainland for years.
No, this is the convergence point. This is a huge deal. For decades, we have seen this tactic used in mainland China. The families of dissidents often face travel bans, they lose their jobs, sometimes they are detained and questioned for hours. We saw it happen with the late Nobel laureate Liu Xiaobo's wife, Liu Xia. We see it with the families of Uyghur activists who speak out from abroad. What this case shows is that this mainland tactic has now been fully imported and integrated into Hong Kong's once separate legal system. The firewall between the two legal cultures is gone.
Anna Kwok is on a list of 34 overseas activists who have been targeted with these measures. So does that mean there are 33 other families potentially in the same terrible position?
Potentially, yes. Any financial tie, any shared property, any joint bank account, any contact could theoretically be scrutinized under this law. The message being sent to the diaspora is crystal clear. Exile does not guarantee safety. You are never fully out of reach. We can always touch the people you left behind.
Let's look at what happens next for Kwok Yin-sang. The guilty verdict is in, but he hasn't been sentenced yet.
Yeah. That's right. The sentencing hearing is scheduled for February 26, 2026.
What is he looking at? I mean, how long could he go to prison for?
The maximum penalty for this specific charge is 7 years in prison. However, because this was tried in a magistrate's court, which handles less serious offenses, the sentence is typically capped at 2 years.
Still, for a 69-year-old man, 2 years is a significant portion of his remaining life. That's not a trivial amount of time.
It is a very long time. And his defense lawyer, for their part, asked for an extremely lenient sentence, just 14 days. They argued there was no malice here, no intent to harm national security. They argued he was a confused elderly father trying to manage old paperwork and that the act itself caused no actual harm to anyone.
Is he in jail right now waiting for that sentencing?
He was granted bail pending the sentencing hearing, but the bail conditions are very strict. A travel ban, obviously, so he can't leave Hong Kong. And a very specific prohibition: he cannot contact his daughter, Anna.
He can't even talk to her. He can't call her and say, I'm okay, or don't worry.
No, that is the wall the state has put between them. Any contact could be seen as a violation of his bail conditions, or, even worse, as further collusion.
The international reaction to this has been loud and immediate. What are the major players saying?
It's been a chorus of condemnation from human rights groups. Human Rights Watch called the conviction cruel and vindictive. Amnesty International warned that it sets a dangerous precedent. The UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders expressed outrage, seeing this as a clear case of retaliation against an activist by targeting her family. They see this as a violation of basic international rights: the right to family life, the right to property.
And what about the U.S. government? Since Anna is based in D.C., they must be involved or at least watching very closely.
Oh, absolutely. The Congressional Executive Commission on China, which is a key body in Washington that monitors these issues, condemned it immediately. And you have to see this against the broader backdrop of sanctions. In 2025, the U.S. sanctioned 6 Hong Kong officials specifically over this kind of transnational repression. Beijing, of course, retaliated with its own sanctions. It's a tit-for-tat escalation.
And Anna Kwok isn't just sitting by quietly. She is actively pushing for new legislation in the U.S.
That's right. She is using her platform to urge the U.S. Congress to pass something called the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Offices Certification Act.
That sounds like a mouthful of bureaucracy. What would that law actually do?
It's actually a very potent potential weapon. Essentially, this act would require the U.S. president to certify every year whether Hong Kong is still autonomous enough from mainland China to deserve the special treatment its trade offices get. If the act passes and the president says, no, it's not autonomous anymore, it would strip Hong Kong's 3 trade offices in the U.S., in D.C., New York, and San Francisco, of their special diplomatic privileges. It would effectively force them to close down.
So she wants to hit the Hong Kong government where it hurts their economic status and their international reputation.
She wants to remove the facade that Hong Kong is still a special, separate entity. She is saying, if you act like mainland China, you should be treated like mainland China. And she's trying to get this passed ahead of a potential Trump-Xi meeting to give the U.S. more leverage.
It's really incredible how this moves from a small, forgotten insurance policy in a drawer to high-level diplomatic warfare between global superpowers.
That's the nature of this conflict. Everything is connected. A mundane act in a Hong Kong insurance office triggers a legislative push in Washington. The butterfly effect is real, but in this case, the butterfly is a court verdict.
But the battle isn't just in the courts or in Congress. It's also happening online, in real time. The information war, as the sources call it.
This is fascinating to watch because there are these 2 parallel narratives running completely separate from each other. If you are in one information bubble, you see one reality. If you are in the other, you see something totally different, and they never meet.
So what is the pro-China, pro-government narrative regarding this case? How do they justify arresting a dad for an insurance policy?
If you look at the pro-Beijing accounts on platforms like X or on Weibo, the narrative is that Anna is the villain of the story. They accuse her of directly causing her father's arrest. The line is, if she hadn't broken the law and become a fugitive, her father wouldn't be in this mess. They label her selfish or traitorous for putting her family at risk.
It's a classic case of blaming the victim.
Exactly. And there was another very specific narrative spin that popped up. Some accounts started suggesting that she needed the money from the policy.
Why would she need it?
They pushed a story that her U.S. funding, implying money from American government-linked groups like USA, had dried up, so she was desperate and was trying to get this $11,000 from her dad to keep her organization afloat.
That seems very specifically targeted to discredit her motives, to make it look like she's not a political activist, but is just in it for the cash.
It is. It's a classic disinformation tactic. It tries to paint her activism as a mercenary act, not a principled one. Anna, of course, came out immediately and called this fabricated, baseless fiction. She stated clearly she never owned the policy, never had access to it, and never sought the funds. But in these online battles, the truth often matters less than the narrative that sticks. It's about delegitimizing the activist in the eyes of the public. If they can make people think she's just a greedy daughter using her dad, it undermines her entire political message.
It really highlights that information is just another front in their national security strategy.
Absolutely. The government views information control as being as vital as border control. Controlling the story is part of what they call comprehensive national security.
I want to zoom out a bit. We've talked about the mechanics of the law and the specifics of this case, but there is a much bigger, almost philosophical shift happening here, a clash of worldviews.
It really is. It's the fundamental clash between stability and rights. And to understand what's happening, we have to be fair to the government's argument here. We have to understand their perspective. If you ask the Hong Kong government or Beijing, they will tell you that laws like Article 23 are a necessary firewall.
The firewall against what, exactly?
Against chaos. They look back at 2019, the Molotov cocktails, the smashed subway stations, the city's airport being paralyzed, and they say, never again. They view that period as a near-death experience for the city, an existential threat fomented by foreign forces.
And they argue that economic confidence requires order. You can't have a global financial hub if the streets are on fire every weekend.
That's the argument, precisely. They say, look, every sovereign state has national security laws. The U.S. has them. The U.K. has them. We are just protecting our house like any other country. They view these laws as restorative, as something that restores the stability that allowed Hong Kong to prosper in the first place. They truly believe that the silent majority of residents just wants peace and quiet to go about their lives and make money.
But the activist view, and the view from many Western governments, is diametrically opposite to that.
Completely. The activist view is that this is the final dismantling of the one country, two systems promise. They see these laws not as a shield to protect the city, but as a sword designed to cut down all forms of dissent. And specifically, with the Kwok case, they argue that this tactic of collective punishment, punishing the father for the daughter's actions, violates fundamental international norms and basic human decency. They would say you cannot build true, lasting stability on a foundation of fear.
The redefinition of national security itself is what really sticks with me. It's no longer just about armies or spies or terrorists.
That's the key takeaway for anyone watching this. Under the new holistic view of security that's been adopted, everything is security. Ideology is a matter of national security. Culture is security. The economy is security. Technology is security. When the concept of security creates such a broad umbrella, there is very little room left for what you might call a private life, separate from the state.
That metaphor of the shrinking room that was mentioned in the source.
It's such a powerful image. It's not that the ceiling collapses all at once in a big bang. It's that the walls slowly move inward, inch by inch. A new law here, a new administrative procedure there, a redefined legal term over there, until eventually there's just much less air in the room. You don't necessarily notice it day by day, but then one day you turn around and you can't move your arms without touching a wall. And Kwok Yin-sang just hit the wall, hard.
And in that shrinking room, you have this paradox of love that Anna spoke about in her statement.
Weaponizing my love for my family will not limit my love for Hong Kong.
That is a profound thing to say in this situation.
It is. It's an incredibly defiant statement. It acknowledges the pain. It accepts that her love for her father is the very leverage the state is using against her. That's the weapon. But she flips it. She says that same love is what drives her defiance, what fuels her activism. It's a statement that says the state can control the body and the money and the travel documents, but it cannot fully dictate the emotional landscape. It's a reclamation of agency in the face of immense pressure.
Let's just put some numbers on this broader context, because Kwok Yin-sang is one man, But he's part of a much, much larger trend.
He is. Since the first national security law was imposed in 2020, over 1,900 individuals have been detained on political charges in Hong Kong.
1,900 people. That's the size of a small village.
It is. And beyond arrests, the entire political landscape has been remade. Major opposition parties have been forced to disband. Independent media outlets, places like Apple Daily, Stand News, which were institutions, have been shuttered. Their editors and executives are in jail awaiting trial. The electoral system was overhauled so that only government-vetted patriots can run for office.
And this new Article 23 is being used actively.
Very much so. Specifically regarding sedition, just in the first year of the new ordinance, there were at least 16 arrests. So the law is not just sitting on the books to scare people, it is being actively enforced, and it is reshaping the demographics and the psyche of the city. People are self-censoring, they are scrubbing their old social media posts, they're telling their kids not to talk about politics at school. It's a fundamental shift.
So where do we go from here? The sentencing is on February 26. That's the next big date to watch. But beyond that,
the unanswered questions are massive. On the international front, will Western governments escalate? If the U.S. actually passes that Certification Act and closes Hong Kong's trade offices, that is a major diplomatic rupture. It directly challenges Hong Kong's status as a distinct economic entity, which is the bedrock of its success.
and what about the business community? If I'm a multinational corporation with a huge office in Hong Kong, do I worry about this case?
You have to be. I mean, you absolutely have to be. If a simple insurance policy can be frozen and lead to a conviction because of a remote political connection, what about other assets? What about your company's assets? The new definition of state secrets, including economic development, that has to be making compliance officers extremely nervous. Is your internal research report a state secret? Is your due diligence on a state-owned enterprise considered illegal espionage? If you hire someone whose cousin is an activist, are you now at risk?
The risks are becoming much harder to quantify. It used to be all about financial risk. Now it's about a political risk that is incredibly opaque.
And finally, there's the question of the diaspora. Does this tactic work? Does seeing Kwok Yin-sang convicted make overseas activists quiet down to protect their families? Or does it radicalize them? If you know you can never go home and now you know your family isn't safe anyway, what do you have left to lose? We might see the overseas activism become even more strident, even more determined, because the bridge back home has been burned down by the authorities themselves.
It really feels like we are watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. A tragedy of a city, but also, as this case shows, a tragedy of a specific family.
It brings us right back to where we started, back to that simple insurance policy. It was an instrument meant for education, for the future. It was a father's hope for his daughter's life, and it was transformed through the machinery of the law into a weapon of state security.
When law enters the living room, the consequences are rarely confined to the courtroom.
That's the reality now. The bridge between East and West, which Hong Kong represented for so long, is being fortified into a fortress, and people like Kwok Yin-sang are the ones trapped inside.
We will be watching for the sentencing on February 26th. This story is certainly not over. But for today, that is the deep dive. Thank you for listening.